Today is the 6th day of this April 1984 7-day retreat. Before getting to a koan, if we do it all, I will take up several topics that have been brought up in meetings with people. First of all, I would like to apologize, if that's the right word, or say that I'm sorry that people have to wait so long in the waiting line while some lengthy meetings are going on. And yet, being in the meeting there cannot be the pressure of time. It is there to some extent. It's unavoidable if one sees the long line of people through the open doors. And yet, if something is brought up seriously, which needs time to look at, open up, go into, we do it. So that probably in this retreat, in which there are more people than in the last few retreats, there may be one meeting less per person than we've had. We could take fewer people, but then we have to turn more people down. We already had to turn some people down. And in talking with people, usually the consensus is rather to get to retreat and have fewer meetings than not to get to the retreat at all. Also, some people, for whatever reason, take less time than others. No one has ever mentioned to me, ever, a feeling of unfairness of being longer with some people than with others. But I just wish to mention it, to be careful not to compare. Can so quickly arouse all kinds of emotions which are so useless and draining of energy, and yet can be looked at. Waiting line is a good place for it. When a topic is brought up, it doesn't mean that everybody has talked about this, obviously, and yet sometimes, as a listener, one gets this feeling, oh, people must really have a lot of problem with this or that. I don't. Saying that to oneself. Sometimes it's just one person who brings it up, and yet it touches on something that is very common, and so it is talked about here. And one such topic is pain. Actually, very, very few people talk about pain, the pain of sitting, that is. In retreats long, long ago, it was a very general thing to be brought up. Now it is not brought up at all. Actually, when I do bring it up, some people report to me, I don't have pain. Sitting does not cause pain anymore. Sometimes people say, I wish I had it. We'll get to that. But one thing that was brought up about pain is whether pain is necessarily built into a retreat as an ingredient of the diet, so to speak. with these long sittings, is there deliberately or maybe unconsciously built in this element of pain, so one has something to work on? Or, as this person was concerned, does this have a conditioning effect on the mind, subjecting oneself to pain? We've discussed a lot among staff and people who happen to be around or who are interested, the length of a round. Actually, personally, I've been an advocate of a shorter round, but there has been, in general, a consensus not to have shorter rounds, because, as many people say, it takes the mind a while to get into the stuff. Deepening takes place when there's a longer sitting, and of course more days of sitting. Way back at the Zen Center we had 3-day retreats, and they were almost unanimously rejected as being too short. And here and there people mention it now, that it takes about 3 days to really, for the energy to start collecting, so that there can be some attention or questioning with energy. Until then, one is still at work, or the tapes and things just keep rumbling around and soaking up the energy, dissipating it. So it's not that we have 35-minute rounds so that there is some pain after 30 minutes, so people have something to work with. As most people report, mental or emotional pain makes physical pain of sitting pale or be quite irrelevant. And yet, that is reported by almost everyone, and I can speak for my own experience, that if there is pain of any kind, physical or mental, and there's really a willingness or a readiness to be with it, enter into it, as it were, be that an enormous amount of energy is released, which again allows attention of what's going on. And this probably being widely known may be why very often pain is used deliberately for spiritual practice. Maybe extending rounds. I've heard of some places where rounds are extended up to an hour, or all kinds of other things happen, which is not the point to discuss here. Does pain condition the mind? Of course it does. If there's no attention, no attending, no awareness that embraces the whole thing. This is really why we're here, because pain has conditioned the mind, conditioned it to escape, to encapsule, to divide off, repress, make unconscious, make indifferent, grow thick skin, so that one will not feel the same kind of pain again. And yet it rumbles around or is manifested in tensions in the body. Yes, pain definitely conditions the mind to either avoid it or seek escape. If pain is used in sitting to get someplace, one has found that concentrating on pain, as some people put it, arouses great energies, then one may want those energies. And this is why one may say, I wish I had that pain again. At that time I really had a tremendous amount of energy. And then one longs for that to come back and may search out pain or sit until the legs fall off to get that energy. And very often, if one uses pain or anything else as means to an end, something goes awry. At least in the long run. Because it may not turn out as it did turn out last time, or one may get used to the result and want more. But pain that one comes upon, that comes up as the superficial layers of the consciousness somewhat quiet down, slow down, in sitting quietly, there's an opportunity to meet that, which we do not have during our hectic daily life, which is so beset by pressures at work to get so much done and then some more. And we worry when one leaves work, all the work that one hasn't gotten done. And then there are all the obligations of family life. And the whole thing of entertainment, at which one doesn't enter into one's pains, on the contrary, tries to one seeks for abandoning oneself to something so one doesn't have to face. I'm not saying that all entertainment of this is of this nature. Can be exquisite attention to, or listening to music, or which is open, and which may not be used to repress sorrow. No activity needs to be used to repress sorrow or pain. This is what one may find really works, that no matter where one is, whether one is in a retreat or at home, at work, shopping or at a movie, if there's fear, not to use that to drown it out, but to stay in touch with it. Not mentally, intellectually, but existentially, to be in touch with it, if it's there. Then there's no cut-upness in oneself. So are the long hours of retreat there to produce pain? I think we've answered that. What are they there for then? We have gone into that it takes the mind some time to settle down. Ideally, all the great masters say awakening is instantaneously, it has no time. But a mind that is churning and turning over from all that's been going on, there's a tremendous momentum of energy in a job that one has left unfinished, or things that still need to be done, or tensions that were at home, or just the noise alone, the hurly-burly of our activities. The nervous system reverberates with that. Not just the nervous system is the whole body, reverberating, resonating with what has gone on. And even though a thought can drop instantly, the body is not instantly restored to stillness and quiet and balance. And then when there is some stillness and some energy collecting in this stillness, all kinds of stuff may come up from the deeper layers of consciousness, which one was never even aware was there, either memories of earlier years or things one doesn't even know what word comes from. All a repository of the way we have lived since time immemorial, laid down as memory traces in the brain. And easily triggered in a state of great sensitivity. We'll come back to that later, maybe. One question that comes up time and again with people is, particularly since we mention so much that this work is not for gain, or to see how one does work for gain, for hoped for attainment, then the question comes up, well, is there no gain in this work at all? What am I doing it for then? A person may bring this in as a challenge, maybe to get something going, which is all right. It's all right. Helps me to clarify the way to put things as clearly as possible. I think in our daily life, if we look at it, there may be exceptions. Almost anything we do for the sake of something else. I won't say exclusively, because there may be times when one is really engaged, something one loves to do, that one doesn't care whether it will sell or will have admirers, although the thought is never very far. But most of the time, I think if we look honestly, we do what we do for the sake of something else. We work to make money. We may not like what we're doing at work, we may hate it, but we go there, we put in the time because there's the paycheck. And we want the money, mostly not just to pile it up, although this is also a pleasure for some people. Just to see it grow. Banks have little pictures of trees showing you how your penny grows into a tree. Maybe it has to be a little bit more than a penny. But money is needed to get something else. We're sort of nice to someone else so that that person is nice to us. We may deny that or not admit it to ourselves, but it is easily testable that if we're nice to someone and that person is not nice to us, then we start smarting and wondering about ingratitude or feelings like that. So many things we do just to be appreciated, recognized, loved, whatever that means. There is this lack of just doing something for nothing. That's putting it wrongly, just doing it. And what comes out of it is the next thing. But it is not already the motivating force, the motivating power, which divides and fragments the activity we're engaged in. If there's a motivating power to do this for the sake of that, then the mind is split, thinking of the end result, the reward, and a seed of trouble is planted because there may not be a reward. There may be the opposite. Lack of appreciation or blame, and then a tremendous burden of frustration, anger. So can work, do not use the word practice. Some people use the word practice. I don't like it because it has this age-old connotation of practice making perfect, and it has a certain repetitiveness associated with it. Can this work of looking into oneself, questioning, is it humanly possible that this take place for its own sake and not for the sake of gain? One may quickly say it's impossible. I've got to get something out of it, or else I wouldn't put myself through this. So we do come here with the thought of gain, to see. So often in an opening talk we do ask this question, why are we here? What do we come here for? So that there is clarity about what we want to get, what we're seeking or wanting to gain. So one is not kidding or deceiving oneself with any kind of ideal images. I'm here for no gain. One has heard that mentioned, and then it becomes a new ideal, to gain no gain. Most people are here, from what I take from talking extensively in depth with people who have been coming here for years, because there is pain and confusion, division within oneself or within the family or at work among the people one is with closest. Or there is a deep dismay at the state of the world. people who have reflected on their life, the progression of their life or the movement of their life, find there is a repetitive cycle at work which seems to be unbreakable. From highs, putting it simply, from highs to lows to highs to lows, with plateaus of indifference in between. Lows being depressions, although we've used the word a lot, the word is not the state. But anyone who has been in that state knows what's being talked about. Maybe not just depression, but utter despair of the meaningfulness of all life. Because of the meaninglessness of one's own life. There may also be people who have read books in which enlightenment stories have been a great attraction. One has read it and relived it, maybe many times read these stories over, and one wants that. One wants something that is not this fluctuating up and down, instability, impermanence of good relationship, transitoriness of joy and pleasure. One wants something that lasts at last, that will get one out of this repetitive cycle of up and down and sort of hanging in between. Something dependable, reliable, certain, something certain. Because one's life, as one reflects upon it and lives it, is beset by uncertainty, no matter how certain one is trying to make it, which usually just means ignoring the uncertainties. One wants what is termed peace. Peace of mind. Tired of the pain and agony of the ups and downs, the fears, and the futility of the escapes. So one comes to retreat to find that peace or something permanent, dependable, lasting. And what actually happens is that the mind itself is exposed in this inquiry. Because it's impossible, it's impossible. I should qualify that, because there's illusion. There's the illusion of having found something permanent and lasting, and the mind has great capacity to create illusion and then so cling to that one will just not open one's eyes to whether it is true or false, and be stuck with it as long as it lasts. So there is the possibility of creating an illusory, permanent something. Religious systems have been very inventive. and quite stable through the centuries in maintaining it, promoting it. The promise of something permanent, peaceful, everlasting, to be attained or reached if one follows the system and the leader or priests. But if one has been through that and through the disillusionment of that, what then? Started out saying that it is impossible to look for something, to find something outside of oneself, or to hope to find something outside of oneself, or within oneself, as an idea, as long as one does not understand thoroughgoingly, the one who is seeking. The seeker, the looker, the wanter, the striver, the reacher outer. This entity which seems so solid and real within one. So in coming to retreat, one finds that rather than getting closer and closer to a goal, one gets closer and closer to the one who is seeking a goal, and to this whole process of seeking, what it is, where it originates, how it affects the whole body-mind and keeps it in constant movement and agitation. To the exclusion of being with what's actually there and from which one is seeking, namely a feeling of inner emptiness, shallowness, loneliness. And the feeling of no love, lack of love. So the question that is raised again and again and again is this: can one be with what is exposed and revealed and sitting in questioning? Unconditionally? Meaning not, all right, I'll do it if you promise that to happen. That's conditionally. I'll do it if that happens. But unconditionally means all of oneself in this attending or questioning, in this withness, with no division. then who is the seeker? Coming in touch with the sorrow of one's own life, which one does if one goes deeply below the surface of the thought activities that are just randomly roaming around. As many people have stated it, it is more than personal sorrow. Can one really be in touch with sorrow? Which is an ocean. It's been with us. Maybe since human beings have appeared on this earth. Please don't misunderstand, this is not an exercise in masochism or wallowing in pain or sorrow. That would be a conceptualization of it. When one is in touch with it, one is in touch with it, and it's real. But when this personal identification with it drops away, this feeling of this is my personal bad luck or suffering, which has so much imagery in it, image of the victim, the martyr, and then the emotion of self-pity, which is such a pit to be in. One knows that. So, if the identification with that can drop away, not this is my sorrow, but just to leave it as it is. And something happens. Which is a drawing together of human beings. To the extent that one understands oneself deeply, thoroughly, from moment to moment, without wanting it to be different, without taking a stand against it, opposing it, resisting it, or wanting to flip into the opposite, bring that about by some means or other. To the extent that there is this clear understanding how this body-mind functions from moment to moment in thought and feeling and emotions, struggle and division, and pleasure and joy. To the extent there grows a genuine understanding of what we call the others. Who, out of the depth of one's understanding of oneself, one realizes are no other than oneself. which is an enormous relief. The relief of not needing to point fingers or put blame on others. When one sees how the whole mess arises within oneself and in everyone else, and how it comes to confrontation, argument, battle, to win, to be on top. One understands the grief of loss, which affects all human beings. And yet not just when we say, well, is it just being with all these emotions, is that an endless pit? So one has to look very carefully what the quality of attention is that sees all that, what is going on in the human mind, not in my mind, but in the mind. Is it again wanting to gain, wanting to judge? That's the activity of self. Is it possible to observe something in oneself without any like or dislike, without taking any stand, totally impartially? And not controlling oneself to do it, but for this just to happen. There be a simple attention which knows no right and wrong. If this kind of awareness comes into being, the awareness of how the mind functions in division, confrontation, sorrow, fear, hope, escape, as we live from moment to moment. If this awareness, which is totally non-judgmental, free from taking sides, clear, open, non-defensive, if that comes into beings, at least for instants of a time, that awareness is not part of the conditioned mind, which is this repetitive cycle of ups and downs, which we talked about before. It is no part of that. It is completely free of that. It has no ups and downs. It's either there or it isn't there. When one is totally enmeshed, entangled in the ups and downs, there isn't this awareness. But if a human being needs to find out about this, no longer content with just flowing or drifting with this repetitive cycle of pain and pleasure, wanting, getting, growing indifferent, and depending on what gives security, and which turns out independable, undependable, and therefore the grief of loss. When one is at a point where one says, no more of that, I got to find out what it's all about, then this awareness may dawn. here and there in the beginning, and it may grow, occur more often, and spread out deeper and longer if we measure it in time. And it is totally free of repetitiveness, mechanicalness, gain or loss. The best metaphor for it would be like a large mirror, clear. Unstained by what appears and not clinging to what disappears. There with everything, reflecting everything in the minutest detail, and yet not part of it. The instant the thought comes up, how can I get it? Can one look at this process that is happening? How can I get it to focus on that, to look at that rather than get caught up in what method can I use to get that? And it's possible to do that, particularly in a time like this where there's very little noise or commotion on the outside, and the possibility for gathering and collecting energy because one doesn't dissipate it in one's daily pressurized living. Not that one doesn't bring pressures here. One does. People report that how they feel the pressure to bring me something into the meeting, to show results, which is conditioning. See it. Not, oh, how terrible that I have that. It's there. It's there to be seen. It beckons to be seen. So it can be on its way. Someone asked, maybe we've gone into this question before, but I'll bring it up again. Doesn't the form of a retreat like this itself condition the mind, getting up at the sound of the bell or running a rigid schedule? There's nothing fixed in this schedule or form of this retreat, and we're experimenting with it all the time. We've already talked about the possibility that if we have a new retreat center, with a little bit of luck, we may have a place for people who want to sit totally without schedule or bells. We have to have a muffled bell so it doesn't. Sometimes a bell has a very penetrating quality, but we may find a way, or there'll be 284 acres to find a place to sit or walk without being part of the schedule, and just come, if one wishes, to talks and meetings. There's nothing sacred or unchangeable about these forms that we have at the present. Whether or not it conditions the mind is a different question, which is this broad overall question of the mind that is conditionable. Whether, no matter what environment you have, what new retreat center, what new ways or no forms, the mind that is in fear of insecurity or of losing, or of not gaining, not becoming, or consumed with desire to gain security or pleasure or whatever. As long as that functions in the mind, it is conditionable, no matter where it finds itself. Because what temporarily alleviates the fear one will start depending on, and what gives pleasure one will start depending on, move in that direction to get it again. One person told me this in retreat, that there was a moment someplace at the lake where just everything dropped off. There was just nothing there, and an enormous relief and feeling of joy and freedom. And then she found herself always walking in that direction again. But she became aware of it. And if you become aware of it, the conditioning is snapped. It had nothing to do with that spot, even though it happened there. But the mind is a crude associator. You know, the dog and the bell salivating at the bell rather than when the food comes, if the bell has been rung often enough. The dog will salivate even if no food is presented. This is the way the brain operates for general survival. To associate things with danger which in themselves may be not dangerous at all. But one sees it and there is the feeling of danger, even though it has nothing to do, it was just in physical proximity or in mental proximity to the actual place of danger. This is why people say, I don't know why this upset me so much, or why there's this fear. I just don't understand what triggered it. But there's this instant flash-like association established in the mind. But you know, attention and awareness is just as instant and can interrupt, snap the chain, the cord, the plug. Even though the body may limp behind a little bit, it's been aroused and old things have been plugged into. So then the thing is not to get upset over that. We're such an incredibly sensitive instrument, and we lament about it. No koan for today. One sees that one's life from moment to moment is the koan. What is it? we will stop here for today.